Welcome back everybody to the final in our trilogy here of Tricksy Foxes tutorial videos. So, you've managed to get yourself your very first apprenticed Tricksy Fox. And you might understand exactly how this behavior tree works, but you haven't actually tried to make one just yet. So, in this episode, we're going to be walking you through a couple of fairly simple early game kind of examples for how to use it. And the first one we're going to be going with is picking up items. We're going to make this little guy pick up all of the drops that we care about in his near vicinity. So, let's just go in here, get rid of all of this, get rid of all of his basic default behavior, essentially. And we're going to give him a selector. First to say, make that a control flow sequence because we want to actually do multiple things here, but after that we're going to say just go to your nearest sage. Okay, so if this one doesn't evaluate for whatever reason, he'll just hop on over to me. Good. Right. In here, we want to have a number of nodes, so let's make this into a getter node, and we're going to say let's make this a condition. Let's just make this a little bit more meaningful here. And we're going to say value exists. What we want to be checking is the main hand item. That will be very useful in one moment. So then we're going to say go to and let's say getter. Yes, getter. Actually no, search. Search is the one we want. Nearby items. Okay, so distance, let's make that a static value of about 10 or so. Near to himself, we're looking for the main hand item, and we're going to be feeding that into a brand new entry here, which needs to be an entity list, and we're going to call that nearby items. So far, so good. Okay. There. So, if there is something in his main hand, he will search for nearby items, and then he will actually attempt to do something else. So we're going to turn this into a decorator. I'm going to make it for each. And we're going to say for each entry in nearby items, we're going to do a loop. So that's another control flow sequence right there. We're going to have a decorator here for force success to say go to whatever the current value of nearby items is. We're using force success here specifically because go to can fail if they can't make a path, and that also includes if they're already next to it. And then we're just going to say items, pick up the nearest item. Okay, so what'll happen here is if there is something in his main hand, he will do a scan for the nearby items, and then when he finds any, he will attempt to pick up all of them. And it will only be items that match the one that's currently in his hand. Okay. If somehow that fails, then he'll just happily come over to us. Now this is not a perfect situation. If we set him to actually be picking up an item at all, then he'll just stop following us because he'll just have a main hand item. But this is just a quick and easy thing to get you started. So he's just constantly trying to follow me currently. Okay, so let's get him some items to pick up, and as it happens, we have some sheep here. Yeah! Okay, that's gotten us some mutton, so why don't you pick up any mutton that's nearby? And as you can see, because we put him into item selecting mode, into item grabbing mode there, he's no longer following us. So let's make this a little bit more complicated. We're going to use a reactive mode here, and we're going to say, with a decorator, inverter, have the condition, value exists, and we're going to say main hand item. So what this is looking for is all child nodes either any fail or all succeed. So what we're checking for is, actually we don't need to invert this at all, that's beautiful, much more helpful. Okay, so value exists, main hand item, and then we also want to add into this our actual loop for finding items. So this will succeed as long as it can find something. So let's go with that. Nearby items. Give that our range. The main hand item. Store that in nearby items. Okay. So, as long as both of these can succeed, then do that. Okay, and now he's back to following us, because there's nothing for him to actually pick up. Perfect. So come on. You can see the trail of particles behind me, because I'm wearing the sage hat. Okay, let's find ourselves some more mutton, shall we? Need something for dinner tonight. Yeah! So, come on. There you go. Good boy, good boy. And the last one. Oh, he's making a break for it. Come on. There we go. Hold on to that. There we go. He's got a little bit of latency to him. He won't necessarily identify the drops immediately because most of the search variants have a cooldown on them, but it's not a very long cooldown, so he does get there in the end. And if I take that out, chuck it over there, he no longer has a main hand item, so he's consequently not actually finding anything. Good. Good boy. He's also item specific, so if I chuck down grey wool, he doesn't recognize it, but if I chuck down white, then he'll pick that up. So, very handy, little Hoover, little there. Yay! Okay, on to the next section then, shall we? Why are you standing so close? Personal space, my guy. Come on. So now that we've had our little guy running around picking things up for us, let's see if we can get him to solve a little bit more of a classical, conventional automation idea. Namely, we're going to have him harvest this wheat. It's not rice, but I think he'll do okay. So let's start just by getting ourselves some prescient notes. And we're just going to sneak right-click to turn these into position and face. And we're going to get them neatly separated like that. So, let's start by marking this one. Sneak right-click to get that done. And then this one. Now we have two positions that are on opposing sides, so we're just going to combine those into a region. And then we need this one to be pointed at this particular piece of grown wheat over here. This is essentially our reference. This is the thing he's going to compare everything in here to try and find all the things he needs to actually get rid of. So sneak right click on that. We need to give them a name so that we know what they are. So let's call that grown wheat. Yep. And this will be our farm region. There we go. So everything in there that matches whatever's there is going to be what he's looking for. Now, just for a little bit of convenience, we're also going to use our prescient candle here. This is extremely good for when you are trying to debug a particular behavior. And we're just going to sneak right-click on him, plonk it down here, and now we can actually see his behavior tree as it updates. It's not got a lot going for it right now, but you just hold on to these. There you go. Okay. So, let's switch this to a sequence for the time being. And then we're going to have our search for blocks. The filter is going to be our grown wheat check. The position is going to be our farm region. And we want to add a position array here, which we're going to call crops. There we go. So just set that to be that. Okay, that will now get us a list of all of the grown wheat blocks inside of there. So then, for each, we are going to say the crops. Good. Let's add ourselves another sequence node the same way that we did before. We're going to have a force success decorator that just goes to that crop if it just happens to be too far away. And then we're just going to have an interact for break it. That's worth noting, there is a complex for go break block which just does essentially this, just all by itself, but we're only using 7 out of 25 nodes at the moment, so it's not a huge concern for us to deal with that. But okay. So, save that. Off he goes. We can see him running. He's paving currently. And yep, there he goes. breaking all of the grown wheat that he can get his hands on. Very good. Now he's not picking up any of them. We could use a variation of what we did last example to have him pick up all of the seeds or all the wheat and then put them into a chest on the side, for instance, and then that would be a one fox farm automation solution. That is well within his capacities, especially if we went the extra mile and made him into a master fox. But okay, so that's this example done. Let's hop on to the next, shall we? So, we have managed to get our little foxes to pick things up, and we've managed to get them to do a little bit of farming for us. But what about things that are a little bit more practical? Like checking out a dungeon or some such together. Now, I have installed a mod that lets me dial up the gamma so you guys can actually see what is around here, because ordinarily Minecraft is very, 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 very dark underground these days. But let's start with just giving our guy a little way to actually light things up for us. So we're going to create ourselves a new control flow sequence, and we're going to add a condition of closer than. Let's just go ahead and invert that as well, so we can actually see if we're farther than. There we go. And our position is going to be our nearest sage. Our distance is going to be set to 8, that's kind of okay. And our next position needs to be where we last placed a light. So let's add ourselves a position, which we're going to call last light. So if we are farther than 8 blocks away from the position of last light, then we want to use the special Foxfire action of the foxes on our current position, there. And then we want to copy the value of our current position to there. So the value we are copying is going to be nearest sage, our entry is going to be last light, and this will mean that whenever we are more than 8 blocks away from the last position where they placed a Foxfire, they're going to place us another Foxfire. And just like that, we have ourselves some light. So I move over here. So now we have a fox that's just going to follow us around through the tunnels and such, and just make sure that we are constantly and happily covered by the lights. Nice. Very cute, very convenient. Now I should note, Foxfires are not a permanent light source. They will eventually go out, so this is not a situation for permanently lighting up tunnels, but if you're just exploring and whatnot out in the world, then it's very convenient. So now we've got our guy just running around, making sure everything's nice and bright for us. And over there, we can see some hostiles, as it were. So, let's modify him a little bit, so he can back us up in combat. So we're just going to name this our lighting up branch. There we go, and hide that just to keep things neat and tidy for us. We're going to add ourselves 2 new sections. So first, we need a control flow sequence, and we're going to have this go for a search for nearby creatures at a fairly wide range, just to make him decently useful, around the nearest sage, looking for monsters, and we're going to store that in a whiteboard entity value called hostiles. So far, so good. There we go. Now when we find any of those, we're going to have him set his combat target right there to hostiles, and we're going to issue a bark, just so we know that he's found something of concern. There we go, 2 should be good. Right. That will then mean that this will only run if there's anything nearby that we need to worry about, and that brings us to his actual combat routine up here. So we want a condition, which is value exists, his attack target, and if indeed one of those exists, we're going to have a very simple bow attack. And let's bring that to 3, that's the minimum number for it to be a critical. And we're going to set the attack target as the actual target there. Okay, so if he has an attack target, he will expend all of his behaviors just trying to tackle that particular target. If he doesn't, he'll maybe look around, see if there's anybody he needs to worry about, and otherwise he goes to his lighting up and following sage behaviors. Okay, so there's a bunch of zombies over there, so let's go see if... Oh, one of them's already taken notice of me. Okay. Whoop, yep. There we go. Nice work, nice work. He's not taking on all of them, but that would require a more complicated behavior. You want to take on the last one? There you go. Okay, and we are totally fine. Thank you very much. Okay, so these are all very simplistic behaviors. These are not very complicated in the slightest measure. Just switch to creative so nobody comes and bothers me for a hot second. You can make these much more complicated if you like. You can also upgrade your foxes to their master rank, wherein they have access to a whole slew of behavior trees rather than just the singular one that we're dealing with here with its 25 node capacity limit. And you can see we've actually still got room to grow in this. We could make it more complicated. We could make following us be something that they're just constantly doing as well as working on all of this. But that is all that you need to know to get started with Tricksy Foxes. I hope you've enjoyed this video series. I hope this has been fun to watch, if not entertaining. If not informative, I suppose I should say. And thank you very much to my patrons, without whom these projects would not get made. You can see their names on my screen right now. They are, indeed, the sages who keep me going. And otherwise, hope you've all enjoyed. Catch you all next time.